You have this pipeline here, so it's just showing up here. So you have your prompt. So this is the prompt. So let's look at the prompt. This is what is passing over to the language model. These are the kind of steps that the chat OpenAI or the LLM will actually go through. What is going on, everybody, and welcome back. In this video, we're going through one of the powerful tools from LangChain, which is called Langsmith. You can use Langsmith to get insights into the traces, the runs, and what are the contents that are passed through the LLMs, do evaluation, and also create data set if you are into fine-tuning your language model. I like this kind of architecture that the LangChain website has come up with in their documentation and how it demonstrates different frameworks and different components in the LangChain. Langsmith is a platform that you can use to work with your language models and analyze the chains and get more insight into the inputs, the outputs of the LLM chains, and also looking at different components. So if you want to set up your Langsmith, first you need to create an account. You go to the website and you click sign up, and then in the sign up, then it will ask you for some information. The first thing you need to do is you need to create an API key. If you're using Python, you can basically follow the very simple steps here, but I have a much more granular way of using Langsmith in my tutorial. So later on, as you follow this video, you'll get more insight into that. But one of the things that are really important to understand is Langsmith has a number of concepts. When we mention things about run, so essentially by definition, a run is a span representing a single unit of work or operation within a large language model application. You get some context or some data. Here it's a retriever. So this retriever has some outputs or some documents, and these documents will be passed to a large language model. So when the large language model interacts with that input or document, it will be considered as one single run. So a trace is a collection of runs that are related to a single operation. You have an app which get information from the user and goes to retrieve some context and documentation from the backend or from the vector store. And so this collection is actually passed to one language model. So that language model has the responsibility to do sentiment analysis. You have another language model that does summarization of those contexts. And so then you have these two language models in parallel, then you pass both into that response LLM, and response LLM will provide the output. So a collection of traces are essentially documented under your project. You have the ability to put feedback for a specific run or trace. These feedbacks gives you the ability to put scores and provide some key or features for that run or trace. You can also put a comment on it. Another interesting thing is you can also have tags for your Langsmith application. Let's say you have 4 large language model. Each has a specific task for your application. So you can typically put the name for each separately so that when you do when you want to create a data set for a specific language model, then you have access to the tags and then filter out that and then create the data set. You also have metadata. So metadata is one of those powerful key features of Langsmith that you can keep track of anything that can be passed to the language model. Things could be around, some information about the user interacting with the app or the generated AI app, or things about the geography where this app is, running. So with that said, let's go into the tutorial. So first, I instantiate a client. Then you have a tracer. Then I have my prompt. The LLM model, so I'm using the chat OpenAI. I have the parser, the output parser as well. And now, when you are building a chain, conventionally you do prompt engineer LLM model and then output parser. But if you are willing to use Langsmith to expand the observability over your chain, you might need to consider adding a config. So it's a method that is appended to the chain attributes. You'll add the dictionary of, I want to give it a tag. So it's my simple chain. Then metadata is where the power of Langsmith comes in, because for metadata you actually can add as many values or key values as you want. So here, for simplicity, I wanted to just pass in the user ID. So whoever is calling this, just pass their user ID. Run name, it's the name that it will be shown on the Langsmith. Now, so by running this, I basically scaffold my chain. So invoking the chain, and then you print the response. Well, this is one approach, and I would call it a basic approach. And there is a more and highly recommended approach. And I basically have searched and found this approach very fulfilling, because you want to make sure that all the information that is passed through the LLM in the language model is stored on the Langsmith. So you want to take advantage of the callbacks from LangChain. This callback will be running on a thread, and it will call this response, and then the response will be assigned to an ID. So run ID is essentially the ID associated with the run that I will do with this response, with this callback. And then I can augment that using the feedback mechanism. So for instance, I get a response from the LangChain, and I view that response, and I can pretty much give a feedback. So this feedback is associated with this run ID. I assign it a key, the user rating, and a score, and also I can put a comment. So to take advantage of Langsmith from the initial state, so right now we're just doing, capturing all information from the language model, and we're interacting with it at an initial state. So later on, once you have a larger amount of data on your Langsmith, you can create a data set, you can have a playground. And one nice thing about this is, so you need to, from the tracer, you can import this method or this function. So this function, what it does, it holds the thread so that until the response is complete on the Langsmith, so there will be completion flag that is returned from Langsmith that the whole record on Langsmith is complete. So it's very nice to have that as well. So if I run this, we ask the LangChain model, what is the best way to work with large language models? So now let's go to the Langsmith dashboard and just see the results we got. Okay, now I am in my Langsmith dashboard. We run this model. So right now you can see that for the LangChain tracer, I passed the name project name. So I gave it a new project name. You can see that I get the information about the feedback, the run count, the error rate, streaming, total number of tokens, which is very important. And even one of the nice things that LangChain recently added to the Langsmith is you can basically get the cost associated with this call. So if I click on here, then I can see all the runs. I can even look at the monitoring here. If I go on the stats, it gives a summary of all the context within all the runs. And you have options to make filtration, add filter, or even add a tag. If I go here and then I look at the tags, I can see that I have the tags here. I run this chat adding just 2 tags, so just 2 tags appear here. I'm looking at a chain. Again, as I mentioned, you might have retrieval chain that will appear here. I recorded the user's data, so we have the metadata here. Within the metadata, you have the user ID. Okay, so now we go to one of the chains. So this is basically one of the calls that I did. So I'm just gonna make it a little bit bigger. My input was, what is the best way to work with large language models? And then I got this response. I didn't show it here, but definitely I can do by calling response. So you can see the response here says working with large language model can be a complex task, and so on and so forth. So I get the same response here, so I can look at it and I can analyze it, and then I can even go more granular. Remember that you have this pipeline here, so it's just showing up here. So you have your prompt. So this is the prompt. So let's look at the prompt. This is what is passing over to the language model. These are the kind of steps that the chat OpenAI or the LLM will actually go through. It has this system prompt and the human message, and then it will generate this response. And this is the output. Here, we'll look at create feedback on the client with this run ID. So I am assigning this trace or this run ID, which I've been capturing here. So this is the run ID. So this run ID has this feedback. So the feedback has this key, user rating, the score, and also you can have the comment. And that's pretty much how you can store information from your call on Langsmith. So I hope that this video was helpful. If you find this video very helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing you in my next videos.